Oui, Madam Speaker. I am thrilled to rise today in support of the member for Fredericton-Lincoln's Bill 19, an act respecting the right to a healthy environment. I want to respectfully recognize and acknowledge that we are gathered here today on the unsurrendered and unceded traditional lands of the Wolastoqiyik. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Pescataway peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. Madam Speaker, we must treat environmental rights as an obligation, not an aspiration. Bill 19 combines human rights law with environmental law to entrench the right to a healthy environment in the law. And it provides citizens with the procedural rights and tools needed to enforce it, with a particular emphasis on protecting the health of children. To do this, it creates a new legislative officer, an Environmental Rights Commissioner, to support citizens in upholding the rights it provides. It provides enhanced access to the courts by establishing environmental harm as the basis for legal action and by protecting citizens against frivolous lawsuits designed to silence them. And it increases public transparency by establishing a public registry to provide the information and data needed for the public to protect their environmental rights. Where a right to a healthy environment has been recognized in law, it has contributed to cleaner air, safer drinking water, and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. In Section 6.2, the bill clearly states, for greater certainty, nothing in this Act is to be construed as abrogating or derogating from the protection provided under the rights of Indigenous peoples by the recognition and affirmation of those rights in Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982. Madam Speaker, I agree that this work needs to be done globally, as my colleague just said. Et en 2022, l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies a reconnu qu'un environnement propre, sain et durable était un droit de la personne. Il s'agit là d'une avancée importante. Cependant, nous avons besoin que les gouvernements mettent en œuvre ces droits au niveau local. Au niveau fédéral, un droit de la personne substantiel à un environnement sain a été reconnu en 2023 avec des amendements à la loi canadienne sur la protection de l'environnement et un cadre est en cours d'élaboration. Le droit de la personne à un environnement sain a été reconnu en Ontario, au Québec et dans 2 des 3 territoires. Bill 19 is modeled after Ontario's Environmental Bill of Rights, which has been enforced for over 30 years. Enacted by Bob Rae's NDP government, it has been maintained by multiple Liberal and PC governments since. It's exactly this kind of cross-party agreement that we are seeking to achieve with Bill 19. The environmental laws we have in this province need to be strengthened, and the Minister of Environment is engaged in reviewing and updating the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Clean Environment Act, and I applaud that. That certainly needs to happen, and we support modernizing these laws. And those updates won't achieve what this bill intends to achieve. I want to recognize the work of the people who are enforcing our regulations that I do think need to be strengthened, and I would like to see them have enough support and capacity to be able to enforce these. Those laws are regulatory in nature, and while essential, they don't speak to our rights. They don't provide the procedural tools that Bill 19 does. Madame la Présidente, les approches législatives traditionnelles en matière de protection de l'environnement, telles que les lois sur l'assainissement de l'air, l'assainissement de l'eau et l'assainissement de l'environnement, se sont révélées inadéquates pour préserver la santé publique et maintenir l'équilibre de la nature. New Brunswick has 3 environmental protection laws, the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and Clean Environment Act. Rather than having to update all of these laws every time changes are made around environmental rights, a standalone environmental rights law is the best way to protect environmental rights. What we've done so far to protect our environment, and by extension ourselves and our health, have been inadequate, and we must do better. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said, global well-being is at risk, and it's in large part because we haven't kept our promises on the environment. Among the provisions in Bill 19 are pathways for citizens to advocate for their rights including requesting the Environmental Rights Commissioner to conduct a review or investigation. This is not a novel idea. Ontario's Environmental Bill of Rights has had a similar provision that has been upheld by NDP, Liberal and Conservative governments for decades. Even here in New Brunswick, Section 28 of the Clean Water Act allows any two individuals to apply to the Minister for an investigation of an alleged offence of the Act. Also, there are safeguards in this legislation. Section 23(4) reads that no investigation is required if the Environmental Rights Commissioner determines that the application is frivolous or vexatious. Legislation that passes through this House regularly uses clauses that makes the new legislation prevail over older laws. This is intended in cases where there are conflicts with older legislation that have been overlooked. Having said that, we are open to making an amendment to this section at committee, as well as on the ability of the Environmental Rights Commissioner to order the Minister to act. La possibilité d'entendre des experts au sein de la commission le comité des amendes de modification des lois sur ces questions ou sur des questions concernant les citoyens qui déposent des plaintes contre le gouvernement peut aider le comité à formuler ses recommandations. Toutefois, les faits observés dans d'autres juridictions montre que l'idée selon laquelle cette mesure ouvrirait la voie à une avalanche d'actions en justice n'est pas fondée. It's important to remember, Madam Speaker, that it still costs a lot of money to go to court, and there is always the risk of having to pay a portion of the other party's legal costs if you lose. The amount of costs the losing party is responsible for paying can be increased if the litigation was determined to be frivolous and without merit. The cost alone discourages many people from pursuing cases that are not strong. As mentioned earlier, the Indigenous rights that exist would remain and not be abrogated or derogated, which means abrogation permanently removes it from the law, a law from the legal system, while derogation allows for a temporary departure from the normal legal framework. So this would not happen, Mr. Speaker. However, we also look forward to having Indigenous leaders be invited to come to Law Amendments Committee to share their feedback. Monsieur le Président, ne voulons-nous pas que notre société, notre économie et notre environnement soutiennent la santé des citoyens et citoyennes du Nouveau-Brunswick et non qu'ils nous rendent malades? Les coûts peuvent finir par être des externalités en termes économiques, mais lorsque les gens sont rendus malades par leur environnement, il y a des coûts réels pour la santé et la vie des gens. En termes financiers et de ressources pour notre système de soins de santé et pour la productivité de notre économie aussi. And Mr. Speaker, should we not ensure that we're all protected, especially the most vulnerable among us, like our children, whose smaller bodies are disproportionately impacted by things like toxins? Mr. Speaker, the Premier said on the floor of this House that government members were free to vote in the best interest of their constituents. At second reading, we are voting about whether or not we support the principle of this bill. La question c'est, êtes-vous en faveur d'un droit substantiel des Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickoises à un environnement sain, assorti des droits procéduraux nécessaires pour le faire respecter? C'est à l'étape de l'étude en comité que nous plongerons dans les détails du projet de loi, article par article, avec, espérons-le, la présence des témoins, ce qui permettra aux députés de proposer des amendements qui, selon eux, amélioreraient le projet de loi avant qu'il ne passe à la troisième lecture. In recent conversations with our legislative colleagues, we've heard support as well as suggestions for improvements. And I know that I'm certainly all for improving this bill, as is the leader of the third party, so that it can achieve its intended outcomes for New Brunswickers. So today, I am asking my colleagues to use their free votes to join me in moving Bill 19 forward by supporting the Minister's motion to send it to Law Amendments Committee for public comment and engagement and to provide a forum for input from First Nations. Une fois de plus, nous devons considérer les droits environnementaux comme une obligation et non comme une aspiration. J'attends avec impatience que le comité de modification des lois intègre les amendements proposés dans son rapport à l'Assemblée législative sur la base des contributions et des propositions reçues au cours de ces délibérations. Cela nous permettrait d'avoir la meilleure législation possible pour enfin donner aux gens du Nouveau-Brunswick le droit à un environnement sain. And so I'll say one more time, Mr. Speaker, we must treat environmental rights as an obligation, not an aspiration, and enshrine them in law. Waliwan, Walalin, thank you, and merci, Monsieur le Président.